Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns. My name is Alan. With me here, as always, is Sol.
Hello.
And with us this week, a very special guest. A man who has earned enough money to satisfy his needs and his caprices, and now only does the podcasts that interest him. It's Calvin Dyson.
I do. I don't have to watch like fucking Rocky films or anything that I don't care about anymore. It's great.
That was a quote, a kind of para-quote of Murder on the Orient Express, because although it does not appear in the Branagh version of the film, but that is the film we are covering today. So we're kind of covering the Branagh version because Death on the Nile is coming out soon. So we thought, let's look at Branagh's last Poirot adventure.
Yes, the 2017 Murder on the Orient Express. For anyone unfamiliar with Kenneth Branagh, but who has seen him in a film without realising.
Yeah, and I went back and watched some other versions of Murder on the Orient Express as well, just for a bit of context.
Versions?
Yeah. Well, there's one other classic version, the 1974 Sidney Lumet film with Albert Finney.
I would say that's the definitive version. That's one I'd already seen, and I went back and rewatched earlier today just to refresh my memory.
Likewise, yeah. But what's the other? Oh, they did it with David Suchet, didn't they?
Yes, obviously David Suchet.
Sushi.
Anyone who knows about Poirot, I guess if you're a Poirot fan, David Suchet did the whole bloody thing on TV over a period of about 25 years. Murder on the Orient Express was one that they did, a feature-length episode, an hour and a half. I watched that. I also watched an American version from 2001 starring Alfred Molina.
Oh, yeah.
I'll come to that in a bit. And I also watched the Japanese version. It was quite recent. 2013 or something.
Oh, interesting.
So I can talk about them a little bit, just as context, not to get into them too much.
Can we set up, just before we go in, can we just set up the spoilers that we're going to go into here? Because I want to know this for as much my own sake. I guess we're going to be talking about the plots of Murder on the Orient Express in some detail, so revealing who done it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for anyone who is not aware, it's a mystery, it's a whodunit. We will be revealing who done it. So if you don't know the story, look away now.
But we are not going to be talking about, am I correct, we're not going to be talking about Death on the Nile? Because I don't know.
I hope not, because I don't know who done it.
So. Good. Okay, lovely stuff. Good, just wanted to...
Yeah, it'd be nice to keep that surprise. Because I had this spoiled for me going into... in fact, I'd just like to preface this episode by apologising in advance in case I call this... Murder on the Planet Express at any point. That is an episode of Futurama, and I'm just very aware that I might accidentally say the wrong name without realising. But yeah, Murder on the Orient Express. I had the ending spoiled before I ever saw it, and I think that's a shame because it's a really nice twist, I think.
Yeah, well, as someone who's watched 5 versions of it over the last week and a bit, I can attest to how well it works when you know the ending. It's not as bad as you'd think. It does still have some hold, and there is an element of like, okay, knowing what's going to come, how am I reading this differently? Like you start to see the characters in a different light. So it's kind of interesting to watch it a second time with knowing the ending, but. It is, you want to watch it without that knowledge. It's going to be the best way to watch it, I think.
Well, I suppose, maybe I'm jumping ahead here talking about exactly why the Kenneth Branagh one exists and why they're bothering to do it when... I guess one of my main questions is that I don't really know who these films are for in this day and age. I know that the marketing was the trailers were very slick, and they had that Believer song on, which was quite popular at the time and all that. But I figured that most of the people who would watch these kinds of cozy murder mysteries on a Sunday night already know who done it, so maybe they wouldn't bother. Or is the appeal just seeing? Is it like you go to see Hamlet? Well, I don't, but people do. But you know what it is. You're just seeing it.
Well, that's it. Murder on the Orient Express is a popular theatre piece as well. It's a stage play that gets put on. The bloody Mousetrap has been on for 72 years or whatever it is. Like, it's obviously that's not.
Yeah, but that is the longest running play in history. So
yeah, exactly. But my point is that people know Actually, I've seen it. I can't remember who'd done it in that one. But the problem with Murder on the Express, which we are going to spoil, is that the whodunit is a very easy thing to remember as a kind of concept.
Yes.
That is the concept, in fact. So it's not like, was it the butler or was it that bloke with the red hat? I can't remember.
And it's also something where I don't think they can get away with doing a kind of revisionist update that takes you by surprise. They kind of have to
how do you twist it?
The basic structure.
Hitler dies at the
end. I think there's still a subset of your casual film goer who do go based on the cast, pretty much primarily. And so for someone like that, both of these films were clearly very appealing. They've both got pretty magnificent cast lists. Purely if you're talking about the name power, the star power.
Can I point out here, this is just out of interest for that, I've got the 2 DVD boxes in front of me here. So a little quiz for you, okay? In the 74 version, it's got all the major cast. So it starts with Albert Finney.
Poirot.
It's got 13 other members of cast, the sort of principal 13, in alphabetical order, just as it kind of to make it nice and...
So don't ask us to name...
No. But, so, in the Branagh version, there are the names of 9 actors, and they are the same 9 actors that are pictured on the front of the DVD cover. Which 9 actors do you think got the nod out of the sort of 13,
in the Branagh
14
one?
Principal actors? Yeah.
Can we take it in turns?
Who are the selling points?
Yeah.
So you go first.
Go back and forth. So presumably, is this not including Branagh, right?
If he is on there, it would include Branagh, yeah. He's one of the actors.
All right, I reckon Branagh's on there, like walking in front of the train, but separate from everyone else. So.
He's on there. It is a bit of a kind of it's set in a train carriage, and it's just them in there in a kind of photoshopped way.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Branagh is correct.
Right, I'll go Johnny Depp.
Correct. He is right at the front, sat.
Yep.
I reckon Michelle Pfeiffer.
Michelle Pfeiffer, yeah, she is there.
Judi Dench?
Quite front and centre. Judi Dench is the other one. You've picked the front 4. So now we're getting further back. Okay.
Into the dregs. Ooh, God. I reckon Daisy Ridley got on there.
That is correct. Daisy Ridley is
there. Penelope Cruz must have been on there.
Penelope Cruz. Yes, she's there. Builders Academy Award winner Penelope Cruz.
Of course. Josh Gad.
Josh Gad is there. Well done. There's two more.
Oh, I'm gonna. I don't want to say the other one in case Saul guesses them. Would they put Willem Dafoe on there? Yeah, okay, Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe
is. I would have guessed.
He is there. He's so far at the back you wouldn't really be able to tell him, but he is there. Yes. Okay, there's one left. Who is it? Who are they putting on the cover?
I don't think they would have had the foresight to put Olivia Colman on the box for a film like this. So I'm going to go with, is it Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Dr. Arbuthnot?
You are correct.
Is it?
Yes, brilliant. And in fact, he's quite far forward. He's next to Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh, I'm glad I didn't go for... I was going to say Derek
Jacobi can fuck off, I guess.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, come back when you're Judi Dench, mate. Come on. And then, obviously, there are some other actors in there that I don't even know the names of, so I guess they weren't going to get the nod, were they? I don't know them off the top of my head. The foreign ones, shall we say. The ones with real accents. So yeah, it is a good cast. So, but the basic principle of this is you've got Poirot, and then you've got 13 passengers on a train. Well, 12 passengers and the help, the conductor guy who's just running around after everyone, and then your other principal character is Book, who is the kind of a director of the trains, who is a friend of Poirot's. So he's knocking about as well. Right. So that's quite a big cast. It's an ensemble story, and in all the versions I've seen, that does push it towards feels like you're not getting the most out of people. Because it's the sort of thing where it attracts these great actors, and then you don't really see much of them.
Yeah, no, that's I don't quite know what I'm guessing that the first murder on the Orient Express, the 70s one, was the one that kind of set a precedent for just these star-studded, like, you look at all of the Poirot films in, like, the 70s and 80s and stuff, and they're all just, like, it's just, like, a dozen famous people all coming together, and like I say, I don't know if that is just the main draw and appeal of these kinds of things. That people just know them so well, or you can just look up the ending, so you need to sell it on the appeal of the stars rather than the mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem with that, the problem from an acting point of view of that is, it's not like, oh, look, it's a small part, but we'll need you for 2 days, come in, film this one scene, done. It's like they're involved throughout the whole thing. They're in the background of a dining car, and you know what I mean? It's like, for a big name actor who's not going to get much to do, you're asking quite a lot of them.
Well, you're asking almost everyone to give quite a generous performance by just allowing whoever is chewing the scenery as Hercule Poirot to like dominate, walk over them in a scene. Because both film versions I've seen, I imagine all versions of this are really all about, look at our quirky detective with a fun voice and a silly moustache. An increasingly silly moustache.
I thought the Kenneth Branagh's moustache was quite... I quite enjoyed it, actually. I'm glad they didn't just do that usual like little black one with the...
Yeah, I think it's magnificent. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful bit of work.
And it is a thing. It's a Poirot thing of having the finest moustache in England.
But it's like a moustache and a beard. It's like he pretends his moustache is bigger by putting some beard behind it. I think it's very...
is that cheating?
It's a very... it's a very... what's the word? Like, dishonest moustache, to be honest.
Well, apparently Agatha Christie saw the Albert Finney version and was unimpressed by the moustache. That was her main disappointment. She said it was
really?
No good. Not fabulous enough.
That's interesting. Huh.
So, how do we crack into this? Because it's quite a dense thing, really.
Well, yeah.
It's a bunch of people on a train. Someone gets murdered. But Poirot's there, so he's going to solve it.
We have a lot more preamble in the latest one. And Alan, have you read the book at all?
I have not.
Okay.
I have read about the book.
Because I have a feeling that the 70s version will be much more faithful to what's on the page than the latest version, where Poirot has his own sort of like pre-title action sequence to show off how great a
I don't know, but that really felt like they just took the ending of another lesser book and stuck it on the start of this one. Was that a brand new mystery that he solves in the opening of the new Murder on the Orient Express, or is it? Does anyone know? Is that based on some mystery he solves with jewels and things?
Don't know off the top of my head, but it is possible. There's quite a lot of short stories with Poirot, so even that could be like a small story that they just threw in.
That really felt to me like they just grabbed another story and went, "Oh, we'll just start with this. We're never going to adapt this into a film anyway."
The pre-title sequence sort of thing I don't think it's an actual pre-title sequence, but it feels like one, the little sort of 5-minute introduction thing to introduce Poirot. I think they do mention it in the 70s one as well, as like, oh, that business in Jerusalem or whatever.
It is a different case.
I just feel like it was an expansion on that because they probably felt that they needed to give him... Because I can't imagine that the trick he does by sticking his stick in the wall and then the guy runs into it. That doesn't sound very Agatha Christie to me. It's a little bit hokey. But I guess they want to show that he can, he doesn't just rely on the other policemen to apprehend the...
Yeah, it's visual for moviegoers to see. Yeah. I do think that's a nice opening for that version, to be honest. I think they were correct to assume that they kind of need to establish Poirot as being this mythological being who is just the best detective in the world and has solved millions of these cases, and this is the most difficult case he's ever come up against because it's so unusual, and I like that. I don't like that it's them pure chance that puts him aboard a train where this incredibly elaborate murder happens to take place. That all seems a bit contrived, but...
Well, that's the nature of these things, isn't it? You just have to buy however many stories he was in, 100 or something. Yeah, he just so happens.
Yeah, but he's a professional detective. He's normally summoned to solve a case, isn't he?
Yeah, and in this one case, it wasn't. It's all right.
How many murders have you...
Look, have you seen Murder, She Wrote, all right?
No.
Oh, that's bad for it.
Yeah, if Angela Lansbury checks into a hotel that you're in, just get out immediately, because someone
if you're
is
friends
die.
with that lady and she comes to visit you, you're
either going to die or be done for murder. So, one thing that annoyed me about the opening on this Branagh version, a couple of moments that just jumped out to me as a bit like, oh, God, this is going to be a kind of safe, whitewashed nonsense. So he's in, where is he, Jerusalem?
Yes.
And he's making a fuss about eggs, because that's what he does.
Oh, yeah.
He needs 2 eggs of perfect size. But that is shown by having this little ethnic boy running around, happy as Larry, a big smile on his face, trying to get some eggs for Mr. Poirot. And it's just like, oh yeah, it's one of those children who really loves working first thing in the morning to serve the rich white man who's coming to town. And of course, because Branagh gives him a little wink and an egg, it's like, oh, everything's fine, isn't Poirot great? But it just made me kind of like, ugh. Just, you know what I mean? Am I expressing myself with ugh?
Oh, no. I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, I think it is there. It is designed to sort of show, if you want your audience to like a person, show them being nice to children or animals.
Yeah, a child in your employ.
Well,
running
yeah,
around
I mean,
to serve you.
That's where it does get a bit icky, but I think it is there, for that purpose.
And then that was kind of just compounded quite quickly after when he's in Istanbul and he meets Book. And Book's there with the prostitute. He's off to have a bit of a laugh with the prostitute. And she's like, hey, I'm a prostitute. It's great, isn't it? I love my job. One of those prostitutes who loves having sex with people for money. You know how they all do. So those two things kind of together just made me think, we're not going to get any edge in this, are we? It's just going to be...
Well, I'm not being funny, Alan, but he's quite a good-looking man, isn't he? I bet normally she's probably having to have it away.
Oh, and
with,
he seems like he's chucking the champagne around or whatever. And all
so
that.
she's probably it's like a really good day at work, isn't it? It's like when I used to go into the office and there'd be some sandwiches left over from a board meeting. You'd be like, "Wait, this is brilliant! Free sandwiches." Yeah. I reckon it's just like that. She's like, "Oh, great! It's not like someone who's physically repulsive for a change."
Yeah, of course. But anyway, but this plays into one sort of issue I have with Branagh's version of Poirot, and that is, I don't think we should like Poirot. He's supposed to be a total dick and quite unlikable. I think he's supposed to be that, as in that's how it's written, not just that's how it's commonly done.
Why?
Because he's a knob, he's like very fastidious and very interested in his own thing. And if your tie's crooked, he can't stand it. And he's just...
Oh, yeah. I mean, he basically says... he has a speech in this version of the film where he basically says something like, I'm incapable of human emotion or something, doesn't he? That's why I'm good at solving mysteries, because I have severe OCD and it's a real issue and it gets in the way of me enjoying life. But at least I'm good at solving mysteries.
I can only see the world as it should be. And when it is not, the imperfection stands out like the nose in the middle of the face. It makes most of life unbearable. But it is useful in the detection of crime.
But here they do sort of play up that it's like, it's almost like a curse for him and he's aware of it and he talks about his obsessive compulsive disorder and all that kind of stuff. And in the other versions that I've seen of this, he's very vain, and it's certainly in the 70s one, he's just kind of...
Oh, he's extremely vain, yeah.
Yeah.
and that was that was part of the character, he's always well presented and everything. Dyed his hair when he got older because he was embarrassed about it. But it's a thin line between kind of lovable eccentric and dick. And it's like you need to just push over onto the dick side of that. I think Poirot needs to be there. But this version of the film, it's quite a kind of safe, happy version, as much as it can be about murder and such tragedy.
I agree. They make him your more traditional lead, and he's got like a photograph of a woman he used to love and all that kind of stuff that he talks to. And it's, he has a few moments where he's sort of like, no, I'm not going to do investigating this. He has the call to action thing and refuses it before he actually takes it up and go, they hit a lot of very familiar beats.
And just to compare to the David Suchet Poirot, which is kind of generally considered the kind of ultimate Poirot performance, because he did it for 20 odd years. And he's a method actor, he read all the stories, got every bit of character information he could get, and then was very insistent that it was true to the books and all that. So when I watched that one, he is quite unlikable, and you're still on his side, but he's not a likable person. And Agatha Christie wrote Poirot stuff for 50 years, and she did not like him as a character. So she didn't write him as a nice character. She thought he was dick. So the Poirot I watched with Suchet, I feel like that is probably more akin to the books. That's a bit of an assumption because I haven't read the book, but
Do you know he carried a penny in between his buttocks to get the walk just right for Poirot?
I can believe that.
I really know very little about Poirot and the legacy of the character and all that. So, I'm really coming at my knowledge of the character is purely based on watching these two films. That's kind of the extent of it. Yeah. So that's interesting to hear, because, I definitely wouldn't get that read on things. I might have thought he was a bit of a dick in a way where I thought I was having a subversive reading of the film, where I was like, this guy's a bit annoying, isn't he? But I'm clearly meant to love him. Yeah. But out of interest, why do you think it's better to not like him? Like, why is that version, that take on the character, superior to the cuddly grandfather figure that we kind of get in the Kenneth Branagh version?
I guess, again, I kind of brought it up with the earlier discussion we had, because it feels like it's lacking an edge somehow. There's a bit more darkness to the other version I watched. I'll come back to this when we get to deal with the ending. But basically, the way that the Suchet version ending is, I'll talk about that later, and it is different. And I think that's a lot of that is down to the character and how it's expressed. Okay, so basic setup is he's going back on the Orient Express. His friend Book gets him a seat, gets him a berth, and we start to meet the other characters. And like I say, there's quite a lot of them, so. It's a little bit bitty, but I think it's pretty well handled. We start to get an impression of who's there.
A lot of people are introduced as this like sweeping sort of it's presented as a single take. I don't suppose it would be a single take, but I thought it was very effective. And he almost introduces everyone in that single take. I think Judi Dench and Olivia Colman come in a little bit later, but I really liked that. I think for something like this, which can feel quite stagey, and that's one of my main criticisms of the 70s version, I appreciated the cinematic flourishes and some of the elaborate camera work and the like that went into this one.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah. There's a nice bit in the 70s one where the train actually sets off, where they make this really big show of this long shot along the train, and then it pulls out. Because the stuff earlier in the Istanbul station there felt very, like, it just looked like a set. It felt a bit too clean.
Yeah.
But then you see this train pulling out, and it's very kind of glorious train spotters kind of shot of it. But
can I just in a very broad sense say that I much preferred the realism that came with the 70s version purely by virtue of it having to use a real train. I was not a fan of the extreme use of CGI throughout the 2017 version. There's a lot of shots that
especially
are
when they come out and
animated.
We see the scenery and things like that.
It just looks like the Polar Express at times. It's just
it's just not quite good enough, is it? It's particularly for the time.
and it's a shame because they're shots that would be lovely, but it just makes it feel very fake and smaller. There are obviously shots that are there to give it a sense of scope, and the fact that they're so fake and computerized kind of makes the film feel smaller to me. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of the aesthetic of the newer one, to be honest.
I know what you mean. I think it's a deliberate kind of very flashy, high colour, glossy kind of take.
It's a shame because I like the dynamic camera movements and the more modern aesthetic in general. It was easier to watch on a, you know, pure level like that. But yeah, just too much CGI, crap CGI. Just yeah.
There's a specific shot where we have a direct overhead when the body is discovered. A very unusual shot. It's one of those shots that breaks the world slightly. It breaks the setting because we're having to see through the ceiling. I think he gets away with it. I actually quite like it as a moment. It does feel a bit out of place. Like it feels like it's a sort of Wes Anderson kind of shot. What's that Wes Anderson film on a train? There's all sorts of stuff like that.
It did make, yeah, I did keep thinking back to the Darjeeling Limited certain camera shots, just because I watched that film quite recently as well.
I agree with Sol on the CG on the train, and I'll tell you what, it bothers me when I don't mind CG being used for these kinds of things. It only bothers me when they use the camera for the CG shots in a way that a camera could never possibly be placed in real life. Like, it's put into places where it's like, well, you would never be able to get that shot if you were using a real train. And maybe that's the whole point of doing it in CGI, but it breaks it makes it feel like I'm playing a video game.
Yeah. If we're doing this kind of direct comparison back and forth, I think it's probably worth noting that, of course, the 1974 version's directed by Sidney Lumet. We've spoken
Saul's
on this
favourite
podcast
director.
about he in one of the recent Diminisodes we did. We looked at one of my aggregated film lists where I rate directors' entire filmographies, and remarkably, my favourite director based on an average score of their body of work for me is Sidney Lumet. Based on the films of his that I've seen, I give his films an average rating of 8.2 out of 10. I am a big fan of his work, actually. And on the flip side, the 2017 version, of course, directed by Kenneth Branagh, I'm starting to think Kenneth Branagh might just be maybe not my least favourite director, but he's up there. He's no Paul W.S. Anderson, but I really don't like him as a director, and I've got to touch on it, because we did Hamlet, the Kenneth Branagh directed, allegedly written, starring movie quite recently on this show.
Did you like it?
No.
I had far more respect for it than you might think, but I think we all agreed that the weak link was Kenneth Branagh's ego. And when I look through his films as a director, he directed the remake of Sleuth. I despise the remake of Sleuth. I think it completely and utterly doesn't get what makes Sleuth work. He directed 1994's Frankenstein, which is a mixed bag. He directed Thor, which, I think I'm on record as liking, but, Marvel, Kevin Feige doesn't let you step too far out of the box when it comes to Marvel, and even then Thor's not one of Marvel's best. I'm not a huge fan of his Cinderella. I don't think he knows how to direct films. I think he's obviously come from the stage, from the theatre. He knows how to chew the scenery and kind of give a big performance. I don't think he particularly knows how to serve the other cast in his films, and I think he locks in on specific things that he wants to do as a director that he then does over and over without much understanding for the film as a whole, and it ends up taking you out of the film overall and not working. Such as, for example, the Dutch angle every 5 seconds in Thor, because he thought, oh yeah, he's out of his own world, it's a bit weird, we'll have a Dutch angle, cool. But then it's like every single shot is a Dutch angle, and it's just like, oh my god, come on.
Just for anyone who doesn't know, a Dutch angle is basically putting the camera on a bit of a tilt.
Yeah. It's usually an establishing shot, isn't it? It's that kind of, everything's a bit skew-if, a bit off-kilter.
I can't say I've got anything particularly against him. As an actor, I think he can stand out. I don't think he can be a team player, perhaps. I think he needs to stand out. But I appreciate that as a director, he's just like going, I'm just going to make films where I can be... Like, I want to play Henry V, I'm going to make that. I want to play Dr. Frankenstein, I'm going to make that. I want to play Thor, I'll make that. And he just puts himself in his films.
Wait, hang on.
I was just imagining.
Yeah, if this film had had Chris Hemsworth as Poirot, I'd probably be all in, to be honest.
Oh dear, can you imagine?
I can imagine, yeah. It's
do you know what? You know, it wouldn't
probably
be
for the
Chris
best,
Hemsworth. It'd be Channing Tatum who'd do it. He'd love it.
Yeah, but he'd be great. Oh, come on! You know he would take it really seriously. He'd grow the moustache. He'd really go for it, and it would be great. Channing Tatum's one of those ones who'll just surprise you like that. He'll just, yeah.
It would surprise me.
I'm quite agnostic on Kenneth Branagh. I've never been bowled over by him. Equally, he doesn't annoy me. He's there. I know that we're supposed to acknowledge him as this great British thespian, but I don't like Shakespeare, so maybe I haven't seen his great roles. I think he's pretty good as Poirot here. I think I like him more than Albert Finney.
Initially, I thought, oh god, that's a ropey accent. But it did feel like he got into the rhythm of it after a while. Maybe I just needed a bit of time to get used to it, because I don't imagine they shot it in order.
What do the Belgians sound like? It's kind of French, but it doesn't have to be that
like
French.
Tintin.
The cast is certainly younger and sexier in the 2017 version than it is in the 70s version.
Yeah.
I don't know if they just deliberately
I don't know
made
if they're
people up in that one.
sexier,
Like
it's
some of the
just
makeup is
different
pretty
time.
terrible in that 70s one.
Don't know if they're sexier. Michelle Pfeiffer's in the cast, Alan.
Yeah, and who's in the other one? Lauren Bacall.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't spoken about the cast in the 74 version. It is a remarkable cast. To be honest, if I was like told you can make a film with these actors at this point in their life, I'd go for the 74 cast. I mean, what a bunch of actors you've got. Albert Finney, love Albert Finney. Lauren Bacall, Ingrid Bergman, Sean Connery, obviously. Anthony Perkins. It's like a rogue gallery of Calvin favourites. Vanessa Redgrave, Michael York. I love Michael York. That is a remarkable cast. I think that's better than the select. Yeah,
it is. I read something. Do you know anything about this, Calvin? I read something that they cast Sean Connery first because they thought if they nailed him, like other stars would come because he was the biggest star of the time.
Oh. When was it? 1974. That does make some sense because he would have been coming off of Diamonds Are Forever, so his career had a little jolt from that. Oh yes, no, I'm reading. Yeah, Lumet went to Sean Connery first, saying that if you get the biggest star, the rest will come along. Yeah, and then Ingrid Bergman joined afterwards. Yeah.
Well, Ingrid Bergman won an Oscar for this performance.
Yeah. I think it's a great performance. I mean, it's one scene, but I think she is pretty phenomenal in it.
That's it. Most of the characters here get like one good scene. It's the interrogation scene. He brings them in one by one. He questions them,
true.
And that's when they get a chance to show something off. And
I will say this version, they do actually show something off in their moment. I can't say the same is true of the 2017 one. I don't feel like everyone does get a shining scene in the new film.
I think Michelle Pfeiffer gets a really good scene.
Yes, she's pretty much the only person I think who does.
Yeah. Well, they were trying to get Angelina Jolie in for the Michelle Pfeiffer role.
Michelle Pfeiffer,
Which doesn't make any sense. She's too young.
Yeah.
They've aged her up. Because like that character has to have 2 adult children and an established acting career, like you feel like that's got to be someone in their 50s at least, and which Michelle Pfeiffer is, but Angelina Jolie would have been about 42 or something.
Yeah. Well, the next person on the list was Charlize Theron, which is equally baffling. Yeah. Well, Michelle Pfeiffer kind of makes sense because it is this sort of she puts on this front of being this sort of quite slightly desperate older woman who's just, a divorcee and all that kind of stuff. And with Michelle Pfeiffer, fantastically attractive woman and very charismatic and all those things, I buy more of her as the pathetic sort of trying it on with everyone she sees, whereas if Angelina Jolie was doing that, I don't know if I'd buy that people would just be like, oh, for God's sake, here she comes again.
She's kind of got to be a little bit over the hill, hasn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, I really like Lauren Bacall in the 74 version because it's not just the look and everything, just the way she's talking and all the little cracks about her, them like going, oh God, she's never going to shut up. Let's do this like that. It all plays so well in that version because she's such an irritating presence, deliberately.
Yeah, that's true. I will say though, I watched Grease 2 the other day, which of course was a very, very young Michelle Pfeiffer's launch pad, really, wasn't it? But what struck me was she much like someone we're going to be talking about next week on this podcast, she really grew into that face. She didn't look right as a 20-year-old, however old she was. It was weird. But, Michelle Pfeiffer is one of my favourite. I've got a real soft spot for, like, Stardust Michelle Pfeiffer, 2007 Michelle Pfeiffer. So, I think she's very well put to use in this film. Although, if anything, it's a bit silly to buy that she would be struggling for attention because she's a very beautiful woman.
Is she struggling for attention? She's
well,
I don't see her particularly like trying to get some action. She thinks everyone's coming onto her and she just acts as if they are.
The difference is I kind of feel sorry for her. I don't feel sorry for Lauren Bacall, I guess.
I think that's it. Yeah, there is just a sense of tragedy about her character in the newer version that I didn't quite pick up on in the older one.
Which is appropriate for what they want the character to do in like the final act.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
The likes of Daisy Ridley and Leslie Odom Jr. will have been studio picks. Like, nope, you're going to put these young people in there.
Yeah. I want to talk about Daisy Ridley.
Oh, okay.
Should we get into that now? We spoke about Daisy Ridley in, I think, 2 previous Star Wars episodes. And I think in both episodes, Alan has made a point of what a terrible, terrible performance she's given.
Yes, I did.
I think I've said something to the effect of, I really want to see her in something else because I get the impression that she is capable, but nothing about this role or whoever's directing her is allowing her to show it. I mean, she's awful in this too. And I mean, she's really bad, but I still want to go to bat for her because I still think there's something there. I still think if you pair Daisy Ridley with like a really good director who cares about their actors, they could get something good out of her. I just don't think she's got that natural, give her a script and leave her to it and she'll be away. And I think I get the impression that, well, I'm not a big fan of Kenneth Branagh's directing, as we've spoken about. I'm not a big fan of J.J. Abrams' directing, and I do love Rian Johnson, but I don't think his focus was perhaps on the performances in The Last Jedi.
Well, as someone who's said she's shit before, I didn't think there was anything wrong with this performance. Not that it particularly jumped out at me either, but I thought she was fine. It took me about 20 seconds to realise it wasn't Keira Knightley. And then I was like, okay. But I think you can only go up from Keira Knightley, can't you? It's only...
I thought it was that classic thing of like, half of her lines were delivered really well, and I thought, wow, that was really nice. But then half of them were just like, ooh, was that the best take of that? It just felt very... But then, like I say, that speaks to me like a director who's not paying attention to what his actors are doing, and I'm still not quite... I haven't given up on her, but it certainly felt like it was in favour of your camp of her being a bad actor rather than mine.
Didn't bother me. I thought she was fine.
So who else have we got here? We got Johnny Depp.
Yes, yet another inexplicable accent on Johnny Depp this time. Now, I think that's just how Johnny Depp talks, but it took me a while to figure out what accent he was doing.
Relics, antiquities, rugs, weird, orientals. I'm new to the game, so, I got the amateur eyeball. But I got a little problem with these so-called appraisers. You can't trust a one of them.
I wondered if there was a bit of Italian in there, because obviously...
It's supposed to be an Italian-American.
Yeah, so I figured it was going for that.
But he's also doing a very gruff, kind of rough...
But he's got that kind of... Yeah, I don't know. I get the impression that's just his voice now. He's got this weird kind of American, but there's like a bit of a British put-on twang in there, and he's smoked a lot and drunk a lot of whiskey. And are we allowed to like Johnny Depp again now? Has he come out the other side now?
I don't read the news, but I like Johnny Depp as an actor.
Everyone hates Amber Heard instead now, right? It's swung the other way. Is that right?
Amber Turd, as he called her. After she shit in the bed, literally.
Yeah, it's clever, very clever wordplay. I like Johnny Depp generally as an actor, and I did like him in this. I liked that you could tell he's doing a bit of improv in there and playing with it. And I didn't get that impression from anyone else. I think he's a bit of a thing unto himself. I liked him immediately because the character walks through the thing, goes, "Dog's on the table, most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life." And it's like, that definitely wasn't the scripted line because it doesn't fit with what, but I liked it.
I think I find the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing really upsetting because, well, they're clearly both toxic people that
deserve each
you
other.
probably shouldn't aspire towards in any way, shape, or form. But I would probably still sleep with either one of them. I just that really upsets me. It's like I can't write them off.
Well, sometimes you got to sleep with people you hate. So it does give you a different experience. So let's run through the other cast. Judi Dench, fine, classic Dench, but she barely does anything.
Yeah,
she's there. She turned up,
and it is a role where you can have a lot of fun with that. I've seen other versions where there's been more there. I think she just doesn't. Feels like she didn't turn up. Just didn't really care.
I can't remember the last time it felt like Judi Dench actually turned up to a performance. To be honest,
okay.
For me, I'm not sure that. Well, that's what I'm thinking of specifically.
Josh Gad, the young up and comer.
Hey, yeah,
Josh Gad.
Nice to see a not quite a different side of Gad, but certainly his talents being put to a slightly different use. I'd say quite effectively. I quite liked him in this. Yeah,
I liked him. Yeah.
Not only does he not sing, he doesn't do like a comedy pratfall at any point in.
He does fall.
So. Yeah,
he's down that scaffolding underneath that bridge.
Damn it! Never mind.
I'd like to make a direct comparison here because in the 74 version, that character is played somewhat eccentrically by Anthony Perkins. And Anthony Perkins is one of those people who will play a character unlike anyone else could. And I think that brings a lot to that character in the 74 version.
Yeah. Like
it or not, I actually do like it. I think it brings a really nervous energy to him. It's perhaps 20% too high, but it really brings a lot of character.
It's like he turned the dial up on his own Norman Bates performance, with all the stuttering and the strange mannerisms and so on. Whereas Josh Gad, I like him in the film, but I guess it feels appropriate that he would be Johnny Depp's sort of right-hand man. But it's a more boring performance.
Yeah. It's the other way, to be honest. It's Josh Gad dialing himself down,
right?
Which is the opposite of what Perkins was doing, which is odd. But I think people would have complained if Josh Gad had been, running around and shrieking with his shrill voice and farting and whatever he does in his Adam Sandler movies these days.
So we have Leslie Odom Jr., who I don't think I've ever even seen anything else. I know he's more known for doing Hamilton and stage stuff.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because he's along with Josh Gad on the poster where it's all Academy Award nominee, Academy Award winner. It's him, Josh Gad, and Daisy Ridley don't get that sort of header. Poor them.
Yeah.
Well, they're Tony winners, I imagine. A lot of them, probably. I don't know if that's true, but
Daisy
I know Book of
Ridley's
Mormon
never
and
won
Hamilton
anything,
both swept the... Daisy Ridley won the competition to be in
MTV
Star
award
Wars.
for Best Kiss or something.
Because she did win the MTV Movie Award for Best Breakthrough Performance.
Oh, there you go. I pitched it down even from that. Best Screen Kiss.
I'll give The Rise of Skywalker Best Kiss of the Year. I've never been more aggressively shipping a couple of characters in a film than when I was watching that film. But, I was annoyed it ended with a kiss, to be honest. I really wanted them to just fuck each other. I really wanted them to just fuck. For their sake. It wasn't even like a weird horny thing. I just felt like they earned it at that point. 3 films of that tension. They deserve it.
So we have Leslie Odom Jr. as the replacement for Sean Connery.
Yes.
Big shoes to fill. What, size 11, 12 shoes? And at least does something, which Sean Connery doesn't. Does fuck all in that film. Absolutely. May as well not have bothered turning up.
Who's the Daisy Ridley? Is it Vanessa Redgrave in the other one?
Yeah.
Right, okay, yeah, because I think both of these parts are just a bit sort of nothingy anyway.
Yeah, they're like young lovers, aren't they?
Yeah, but at least I get the young part in the Kenneth Branagh one instead of Sean Connery and Vanessa Redgrave. Yeah.
But yeah, it is in that 74 version. Sean Connery really does do nothing at all. He kind of comes in to defend the lady at one point and is sort of...
I thought that was a good scene.
Slaps Poirot with an open hand and...
That's probably my favourite scene in the whole thing, to be honest, that one.
Yeah, I really like that. The tension builds up quite nicely. He thinks that Poirot's like slapping his girlfriend and he barges
That's
his
my
way
job.
Oh, God.
But that's the bit where we see Poirot is willing to kind of change his behaviour to fit the interrogation, and pretend and act emotional when he's not. I like that. I like seeing that in the detective, like doing that kind of thing. We don't really get that with Branagh particularly.
No. But they add in all this stuff with Branagh and his long lost love that he occasionally
Emma
talks
Thompson.
to. Is that who it is?
Yeah, so you picture of a young Emma Thompson.
I did not know that. Oh, that's another one of his mates he called up.
Well, it's his ex-wife.
Oh, is it actually? Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Oh. Can we talk about the main motivation? Because basically, we haven't really talked about. I'm assuming if people have made it this far into the episode, they probably know what the plot is. But it is essentially that all these people on the train all share this same backstory with these people, the Armstrongs, right? And the little girl was killed by.
So basically,
Johnny Depp's
our murder victim gets killed, and in the investigation, we find out his real identity. He was a criminal who kidnapped and killed a little girl and then caused tragedy to the rest of the family, but got away with it. And so someone has claimed vengeance upon him.
And so it's tenuous. Well, I mean, I say tenuous. They do justify everyone, I guess, coming in, and it's all like
pretty much
sort of family friends and people who really cared about this young couple whose daughter was murdered, and they all band together. I think that this whole backstory is handled much better in the 70s movie than in the Branagh one, where the 70s movie opens with it. We have this sort of like flashback sequence, and it's all very mysterious and sort of filmed like a silent film, which I thought was quite nice. But in the Branagh one, it's just kind of dropped into a conversation, and all of a sudden we get flashbacks kind of in the middle of the film. And to the extent that I found it quite confusing, actually, in the Branagh one. Do you agree with that? Because I think it's quite difficult. I know that they sacrifice... In an ideal world, you open up with that backstory, or at least some details about the case. They sacrifice that because they want to put the spotlight on Branagh's Poirot and introduce him as this sort of dashing hero type. But I think the story itself might suffer as a result of not having that set up front.
I don't think it's a bad thing that it gets revealed later on, because it's obviously something that gets revealed later on. Why would we know anything about that at first? If we're kind of playing the audience is learning with Poirot. So in that sense, I kind of like it. It's hard for me to judge because I watched this. It was like the 5th version I'd watched, so obviously I knew just those snippets of backstory. Like, I already know what's going on. So, it's a bit hard for me to judge that explicitly. I don't know. It all made sense to me, I guess, but I know the story already.
Yeah, I think it's tough when you're trying to sell this really important thing matters to all these people, but we're not actually there for it, and we only see it in these kind of flashbacks.
That is a problem when something only gets revealed at the end, like in a murder mystery, and it's like, oh, right, that's why. Yeah. Well, having watched several versions of it and knowing the ending, what I did notice is that watching it, knowing what was coming, didn't change the viewing of it. It's like, I want to see a little moment between a couple of the characters where you're like, oh, I wouldn't have noticed that, but there's something going on there, or a hesitation, or someone saying the wrong thing and then kind of moving off. Something little things that wouldn't mean anything on a first watch. And there isn't, basically. There isn't much of that at all. And that's a fine line, because obviously you don't want to be too obvious about it. But it is a bit of a frustrating reveal in that all these people have been able to not just carry out this murder, which was a thing of passion, I understand that, but also be able to lie directly to someone who is a very skilled interrogator and be able to keep that up. And I know there's the odd little slip or whatever that starts to give him a clue. But, there should be a weak link in there somewhere. There should be someone who...
Yeah, I think Josh Gad's character should just be saying lots of stuff along the lines of, like, what are the odds that the world's greatest detective would be here, for fuck's sake, and having, like, a panicked breakdown about that.
Yeah. It's difficult, though, because you don't want to give anything away. You don't want to make it obvious.
I kind of touched on this earlier on about the cinematic, more cinematic quality I feel of Branagh's version, and I think it really helps. Like, I'm comparing it to the 70s version again, but it's difficult not to, because it's the same story but just told two very different ways. I can appreciate some of the claustrophobia that you feel in the 70s one about being trapped on this train, but at the same time, it does become like the middle portion is just Poirot wheeling in people one after another and they make nice jokes about it. Martin Balsam's character at the end of each character's interview is like, they did it. It was definitely them at the end of every single person. I thought that was funny.
I did enjoy the kind of him and the doctor, bit of a comedy double act kind of thing going on. And that is not in the Branagh version, because the doctor character is kind of enveloped into Arbuthnot.
I kind of agree with you, Calvin. I find the 70s version weirdly uncinematic for a film by Sidney Lumet. The man who managed to make 12 Angry Men like really visually interesting, despite it just being 12 people in a room talking.
What did you think of the score in that 1974 version? Because it really jumped out to me as being slightly out of date. Like, it felt 10 years out of date. Like, it felt like this big kind of theatrical score that you would put on, like, Around the World in 80 Days or something. Quite fantastical and overblown.
The whole film felt like it was going for that kind of vibe to me. Like, the opening title cards and everything all felt quite like a throwback of some kind.
But it's not. It didn't feel like a throwback to the 30s. It felt like when it's set, it felt like a throwback to the 60s with like big musicals and big fantastical spectaculars.
When they show you the flashbacks to like the Armstrong case and everything, like, it is filmed sort of like a silent film. Like, they do overcrank, undercrank, whatever it is, the camera, and they do, it's some sort of Nosferatu style shots, German sort of silent film looking. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because that was in the past, obviously. But some of the makeup really baffled me, and I didn't know if that was supposed to be indicative of the period setting or what. But some of the women just had this like plastered on like white makeup, like. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm not a big fan of the direction in Sidney Lumet's version, and it's weird because
he's your favorite director.
Well, statistically speaking, But no, I mean, he is up there. He's a director I really do like and think a lot of his direction normally. I find Murder on the Orient Express to be a weird blip in his career. It's not to say that I dislike the film, but I just don't think it feels like one of his.
There's nothing outstanding about it particularly. But, it's all very nicely, the set and the costumes and all that really set the scenes. It's, it ticks those boxes, costume design and all that.
Yeah.
I do want to I know we kind of dealt with the actors, but we didn't mention Derek Jacobi, and I wanted to know him because I think I just think Derek Jacobi is a really good actor. And even in a small scene managing this, I think he stood out to me anyway.
Deserves his name on the poster at least.
Well, and replacing John Gielgud from the previous film, it's again big shoes to fill, but it's a classic English butler role. Can I talk a bit about the other versions I watched before we get into the ending? Because it'll lead me into the ending.
Lovely.
Okay.
Quickly, let's talk about the Alfred Molina version. It was made for American television, but the big thing it does is it was made in 2001 and it was set in 2001.
Oh.
Which, do you know what? It's got a bit of a bad rep, this version. I actually found it quite watchable. It wasn't, I think it handled all that quite well. Because there's like a bit, when we start to see the flashback moments of what happened with this case with Daisy Armstrong or this little girl that went missing, he's like watching that on these like videos on the internet. Which is, and it's like this really old-fashioned kind of Internet Explorer kind of thing. Yeah, there's a couple of flip phones. Actually, I think they do a good job of modernising it without it losing the tone. I actually thought it worked okay. But it's still sort of set on a train that's quite old-fashioned in its style, and they're isolated from civilization, so you kind of lose that time anyway. It doesn't really matter. So once you're on the train, I think it's okay. The other big change they do is there's only 9 people or 8 people instead of the 12, 13. Which I think makes sense if you're trying to simplify something. It may have been a slightly shorter version. It loses that poetic sense of 12 jurors kind of thing. But that's okay. And it simplifies it a little bit because there are definitely ancillary characters here that you can take out of this.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're the ones that Kenneth Branagh didn't cast as his friends. They're the ones who are just actors we've never heard of and we haven't mentioned, even though they were perfectly good. So
we've barely mentioned Olivia Colman, actually.
That's true, yeah. That's true, yeah. Alfred Molina as Poirot, he's not really doing Poirot. He sort of does a bit of an accent, but he's not. They don't really not worried about any of the actual kind of classic character stuff of Poirot, little eccentricities or anything. He's just a detective, basically. They don't really go all in. But do you know what? I actually found it perfectly watchable as a kind of run-of-the-mill whodunit kind of thing. It was all right. Now, I watched the Japanese version.
Yes.
Which was from 2015. I just looked at
Oh, wow. Recently?
Yeah.
Was that actually, like, properly authorized and based on Agatha Christie, or is it some kind of... Oh, wow, okay.
Is this the mini-series that they made?
I don't know what they would classify as. It's sort of... It claims to be 2 episodes, but they're both like 2.5 hours long. The first episode is your classic Murder on the Orient Express story. So I watched that, and I knew there was a second episode. And when I'd read about it, it said, "Oh, it's an original story that's not based on Christie or whatever." So I thought, okay, they're doing another Poirot story or something. But actually, what it was, the first episode, 2.5 hours, is the full-on Murder on the Orient Express story as we know and love. And then it comes to the end, and he does the big thing, the reveal and all that. And the Mrs. Hubbard equivalent says to him, "Okay, Mr. Poirot, you've worked it out. I'll tell you everything." And then it ends. And the second episode is the story. It's all these characters, the kidnapping, where they were at the time, how they all got together to decide to revenge, and then you're seeing the other side of it. Oh my God, cool. Poirot's, the famous Detective Poirot's on the train. What are we going to do? We're going to have to quickly change our plan.
Huh.
Which
that's cool.
I did not watch because 2.5 hours long. What am I made of time? But I kind of saw they do at the end of the first episode they do a kind of what's coming up next, and it was obvious what it was. I like that as a concept. It's an interesting way to explore that story further and get into those characters that we don't get into.
Out of interest, who plays Japanese Colonel Arbuthnot?
It's funny, it's kind of a Scottish accent, actually. I mean, look, it's not a good production. It's very cheap. Like, it's obviously a TV thing, but it does look cheap.
Is it set on like a bullet train?
No, it's set in the 30s.
With everyone crammed in. The conductor, like, shoving everyone in because they won't fit.
It is set in the 30s, apparently. If I was asked to guess based on watching it, I would have gone with 60s, because the suits just felt a bit kind of more modern. But, okay, whatever, the 30s. And I was curious, like, how is that going to translate? Because Murder on the Orient Express is a very kind of British style, British feel to it with this American influence. How is that going to translate to Japan? As far as I could tell, it's pretty much the same. There wasn't any obvious kind of like, oh, they're expressing this differently because they have a different class system or this. There's little bits and details, like the character who's like an Italian American. He's from kind of a certain bit of Japan where like they're a bit rougher and they're really suspicious of him because sounds like he's got a rough accent. But like things like that.
Yeah.
But it looks cheap just in general set and stuff like that. And I don't know how that I don't know what Japanese television is like, to be perfectly honest. So I don't know if that's typical or not.
From what I've seen, it tends to be quite digital looking, quite cheap. Yeah.
I mean, I don't see any reason why Japan's TV would be any greatly different from British. If you're just setting out to make a nice period drama, you'd think you'd be able to go all in and do it. Anyway, I don't know. But they do go quite full on comedy. Like the score is kind of like like that kind of comedy score. And the guy playing Poirot is pretty like full on. He's like a little Mr. Bean, right? He's very Bean-esque, and there's some pretty broad comedy moments in it. Which, it doesn't particularly add to the tone of the piece. It feels very superficial all the way through and not especially very good.
But what about the David Suchet one?
Yes, so I have more to say about that because it is much more of a classic take. This is your Christie novel. They're doing it justice. It's also essentially a film. It's an hour and a half long, it's full length. TV budget, but it's handled well from what I could see. It being set on a train, it's a relatively limited set you're having to work with. The way it's filmed was perfectly nice. Not big dramatic cinematic things, but it worked for what it is. But the big difference really is Poirot. And that is because Suchet playing Poirot, I think, is probably more true to the classic novel Poirot. But also, he's been playing him for 20 years by this point, and he knows what he's doing with it. And that means he is more of a knob. He's like quite irascible, and he's not interested in being friendly with anyone. He doesn't care. And this comes out at the end, particularly, because when it's all revealed, he doesn't gather them all together and go, hey, everyone, so this is the big reveal scene. Everybody sit down. So here's what's happened. He's worked out what's happened, and he's not happy about it. It's also cold. They're all sheltering together in this train carriage. So he's stuck there with them, and he kind of knows what they've all been up to. They don't really know by this point. And then it's slowly kind of revealed and dragged out of him what he knows. And they quite readily kind of confess to it. And then it becomes this whole thing. It's very atmospheric. It's much more emotional. We see all the other people on a more emotional level, which, like I say, I think that's what I was missing somewhat. They acknowledge their part in the murder much more openly. Then it really becomes about they're saying, look, you know what we did was in the interest of justice, so you should not dob us in, like tell the police it was just this lone killer, whatever, assassin. The last sort of 20 minutes of the whole thing is just him struggling with that concept. And it really tortures him. And it's just, it blew me away because I have not got that sense from any of the other versions. Kenneth Branagh is kind of pissed off at them and he tells them off. But it's like, this is a big turning point for Poirot where he has to choose truth or justice. Is it for him to decide what is justice? That's for the law to decide. It's this very drawn out, quite long thing. And there's that we even set up previously. He's a Catholic. He's struggling with that kind of concept. He's praying about it. He's talking about Catholic guilt, and the Catholic ideas of forgiveness and stuff like that. Should he forgive them? Should they have forgiven this other person that did them wrong? There's all this kind of stuff, and not quite as directly as I'm telling you, but it's all in there.
Yeah.
Suchet is acting his little socks off. He's doing a great job. And by the end, Poirot just looks drained. He's tired. And then he gets off the train and he goes to the police and he basically tells them the fake story. But even then, he takes no pleasure in that. You can see that's going to torture him forever. This is going to be something that is on his mind. He gives them no quarter, really, until right when he makes that decision. And he is disgusted with what they've done. He thinks they've taken the law into their hands and they are murderers. And it takes everything for him to let that go. It's really, really well done. And I don't know how much of that is in the book because that isn't really come across in any other versions I've seen.
That strikes me like someone who watched the 70s film and went, this is really not how I'd approach a story. Because I really did feel both versions of this film were lacking in that. We never really see the weight of what is a big decision on Poirot. It's just done. It's thrown away like a little gag. Yeah. Like, this ridiculous story could be what happened, or it could be this, which is clearly what happened. And I think it's the ridiculous one. Hey, we're all chums.
They definitely, they do invest in it a little bit, and I think that probably comes from the fact that this is a Poirot 20 years into a series. This is a character that's been going for 20 years. Even though I'm watching this as a separate entity, this character has evolved and changed. Like, so I think as a series, you're playing to an audience that has invested in this character and understands where he's come from.
Fair point, yeah.
So you can get away with that a lot more, or they felt they could.
But I think that, because they have committed murder, premeditated murder, and they have taken justice into their own hands, and I think a lot of people would be quite upset to learn that had happened in real life.
I do get some of a sense of what you were talking about, not to the extent that it sounds like is in the TV version, but I certainly get more of Branagh's Poirot being torn than the 70s one, which is like, I couldn't quite believe how the 70s one handled it. Anthony Perkins' character literally sort of gets up and like takes a bow and everyone just sort of shakes hands and like, oh yes, isn't this great sort of thing. And the music even goes kind of jolly and it's like, oh, this isn't quite... I guess in the Branagh version, we do have Michelle Pfeiffer acting her socks off, and she, is about to commit suicide at one point. So there is some kind of repercussion to it, and she kind of takes the blame for everyone else.
That feels like a really kind of blow to the face, dramatic moment.
He kind of tests her, doesn't he? He kind of gives them a test with the gun in the newer one to almost prove their worth for being allowed to get away with it, to prove that they're not bad people.
Just one other thing about that Suchet version, the killing scene. So we actually get that flashback of them killing Toby Jones. It is in this version. It's so good. It's much better than any other version I've seen. You get a much better sense of intent from it all. You really feel how much they want to kill this guy, and they've done it in a way that he's drugged, so he can't really move, but he's aware of what's happening. And the old lady, Princess Dragomirov, she sits by his ear and she tells them why they're doing it, and that he's going to like burn in hell, and that I want you to be awake so you can see everybody you've hurt is getting their revenge. It's so brutal and emotional, and every one of them just comes in, stabs him, and walks off. It's so much better than the other versions I've seen.
Okay, yeah, because the 70s version is like, I mean, I kind of like the Branagh one. It's a bit more frantic, and they're passing the knife around quickly to do it. Whereas in the 70s one, it's this
I don't like either.
slow carousel of people coming in, and we have to listen to them all.
It's very ceremonial.
Yeah, and it just doesn't work because it's like, well, he's probably dead by the time you get to the fifth or sixth
exactly.
person.
It feels like they're posing for the flashback photography sequence in a movie. Yeah, just on a complete tangent, Alan, I looked up the actor who played the Japanese equivalent of Poirot in the Japanese series that you watched. A guy called Mansai Namura, who plays a character called Takeru
Suguro-san.
Their equivalent of Poirot. Do you know which other iconic character he's played in a film we've covered on this podcast?
Godzilla.
Yeah.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. He played Godzilla in Shin Gojira.
Oh, really?
Which I'm guessing was a motion capture performance, because I think Godzilla's CGI in that film.
He's a very odd, like, he's doing a kind of quirky character, and he's like, he kind of pulls his chin in and his back is really straight, and he just it sort of says everything with a silly voice. It is not a subtle performance. I'll tell you what as well, that Japanese version owes very heavily to the 1974 version. Like, there are a couple of scenes that are exact shot for shot, like distinctive looking shots, like when he sets up the hatbox thing and he burns the letter, and the way that's framed within this kind of little booth thing, that they do that. And the fact that he has these little sidekicks, the train director and the doctor, who are kind of a comedy duo, that they do that as well. It's extremely similar to the 74 version. I think that's basically what they based it on. Just for a little bit of entertainment, some of the actors in that David Suchet version, Hugh Bonneville is playing the butler.
Oh, all right. Downton Abbey's.
Yeah, the same year that Downton Abbey started. Although this episode was like the big Christmas one of that year, so Downton Abbey must have already been on by then. And playing the Mrs. Debenham, the Vanessa Redgrave / Daisy Ridley character, is Jessica Chastain.
Oh, wow.
Before, like, just the year before The Help. So she must have been relatively unknown. Not a young unknown. She's about 33 or something, but she obviously wasn't an established actor. And I don't know if she was in Britain or something, doing something else, and we want an American actor. Because obviously that character has an English accent, but it was ultimately revealed she's American. So she's doing the English accent and everything. There's a couple of the, known actors in it, but yeah, I just thought I'd mention that.
Cool.
So, talking about the ending there, any other thoughts on the ending in the Branagh version, how it's played?
I just much preferred it to the 70s version. Just everything. I felt like it was much more suspenseful, a lot more drama. The 70s version is just sort of like, haha, I found out how you did it, and it's fine. I'm not going to throw you all in the jail together. And they're all very happy with it. I get drama and suspense and all that stuff from the Branagh version, whereas the 70s one, just as a whole, I just think it's a bit flat in that respect.
Yeah, I understand that. Oh, do you know what kind of annoyed me? Generally, this is obviously from the original story. So, there's 12 of them, and they all take one stab at him, and it's like, it's this nice little poetic tie-in with the 12 members of a jury. That's nice. Except there's 13 of them. And it's just a bit messy because, like, the one of them, she's too much of a wilting flower / drug addict to be able to do it. And so her husband has to do it for her. And he's just there. And it just feels a little bit messy and sloppy with that. If you're going to do the 12 thing, just make it neat.
Yeah.
Like, you could have him as one of the 12, like it's his wife who's been hurt, so he's involved or whatever. But I don't know, it just didn't quite work. And in the Branagh version, they didn't even bother casting an actor to play the husband. He must be I don't know who he is, what he is, but they obviously didn't trust him to speak. he said, look, just do a flying kick onto this extra in a really weird scene at the beginning, and then just stand next to this woman while she pretends to be on drugs. Very crap characters in the Branagh version, those two.
Yeah, and they just sort of pop up towards the end, and you kind of forget that they're there. They're not played by anyone sort of that I recognised anyway. So, right, I'm really interested, actually, Alan, to hear your rankings of all of the versions that you've seen. I'm really appreciative that you did the hard work on this, so we didn't have to.
Well, I was kind of really curious as to how it would be seen in different times and different places, and actually not that much difference. They really stick to the plot. I was particularly that Japanese one. I was really hoping they were going to go like really do something different with it. Yeah, they didn't. I was a bit disappointed. Okay, I'll go in chronological order then. So, Murder on the Orient Express, 1974. I gave that a 7 out of 10.
I give the 70s one 6 out of 10. Enjoyed all the cast, and there's plenty of moments to like, but overall I just found it a quite underwhelming experience.
Yeah. I gave it a 7, which is a very about as low a 7 as one could give, to be honest. It's I agree. It's a solid adaptation. It's quite an underwhelming one at the same time, but it's fine.
Has that affected your Sidney Lumet ranking?
No, I'd already seen this prior to last time we spoke about Lumet. No.
Okay, so I'll go through the other ones I watched. The Alfred Molina version, I gave a 6 out of 10 to, which I think is generous, judging by what I've read about other people's opinions. But frankly, it worked. It was fine. It was nothing special, but it told the story functionally.
Yeah.
Then the David Suchet version, the 2010 Poirot TV version, definitely the best by a long way. I gave it 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it as well. Like I'd already seen Branagh's version, like maybe a year ago. That was the first time I saw it, so I'd seen that. I watched the 70s version. I think I watched the Alfred Molina version before this. So I knew the story, and it still managed to bring something new to it and keep me engaged.
I think I quite like to watch this David Suchet show from start to finish at some point. You know?
I'm definitely curious to do that. Yeah, I don't know if it would hold up. I honestly don't know if they're all as good as that one, because it might have taken time to build into it. But usually a murder mystery, like a nice tight 1 hour murder mystery, it's a good watch, isn't it? You know, it should be fun.
Yeah.
So to just move on, the Japanese version I watched, it was not good. It was very kind of comedic, stupid, kind of silly. And it really felt like it was doing a lot of copying from the 74 version. I do like the concept of the second episode that I looked at, but how well it works, I don't know. I'll give it a 4. Pretty weak. So Branagh. Interestingly, I watched this film for the first time probably less than a year ago. I never saw it at the cinema. You know, I found it in a charity shop on DVD. I was like, yeah, well, that'll be a nice watch. I'll get that. Finally watched it, and I did not like it. So when I came to watch it again, I was kind of like, you know, I'd already watched 4 versions of it by this point. But it's interesting what you said earlier, Calvin, about how well the backstory comes across and how much of that works. When I watched it the first time, I think I did know the ending, like they all did it, but ultimately I didn't know how it all came together. When I watched it this time, obviously that's all now, well, I know everything. So perhaps it made more sense to me this time because I have already more pre-knowledge, right? So basically, the result of that is, when I came to rate this, I was like, do you know what? I'll give that a sturdy 7. I'm all right with that. I think it did a solid job. Came to look at my IMDb, and the last time I rated it, it was a 5.
Ooh.
That's a pretty significant difference.
Yeah.
And how much do I express that? So basically, I split them at difference. I'm going to give this an official score of 6 out of 10.
Oh, okay.
Because I think that reflects, obviously, my first impressions and then later watch.
So I'll go next then. I'm going to give it an 8. Which, yeah, might seem extreme, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it did. I think it jumped up a bit in my estimation actually rewatching the 70s version and how much better I think it did an awful lot of things and put a, contemporary style on it. It's a bit glossy and like Saul was saying earlier, I think some of the CG is a bit video gamey, but overall it was strong performances and I like Branagh as Poirot. There's more emotion and suspense in it, so I prefer it on that basis.
I'm going the other way, I guess. I gave it not a lot in it, because I gave the other one such a low 7 out of 10. It's practically a 6.5. And I give the new one a 6, because it's just very, I don't know, I just got bored with it. And I'd never seen it before. I watched it for the first time the other night. If it was the first and only version of that story on, as a movie, I'd probably give it a 7, but it isn't.
I think the story in general, it does suffer from this kind of middle section where we have to interrogate 12 people and I think it does a good job of handling that, but it's ultimately, it's just like, okay, bring the next one in. And then there's like the big reveal. I think it's a lot of characters to have to deal with, basically.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Calvin, for joining us yet again.
No, it's fine. Maybe you'll actually invite me on for a Diminisode this time, as I'll be seeing Death on the Nile. I've seen Tenet, and I was not invited on that.
You saw Tenet? Oh, well, I didn't know you'd seen Tenet. It didn't seem like something you'd go and bother with.
No, well, yeah, supporting cinema.
well, let us know your thoughts on Bill and Ted Face the Music. You can come on the Diminisode for that.
Oh no, I'm not seeing that. No, don't care.
Listeners, check back next week because we've got a really, really, really exciting, fun episode with a cool guest coming.
All right. Well, that makes me feel good about myself.
Someone more famous than Calvin Dyson.
There's almost no one in that space. I don't know who it would be.
He's probably got fewer YouTube subscribers than.
Yeah, that's true. But Calvin will be back the following week.
Yes.
So fret not, Calvin fans. He's going to be setting up shop for the better part of a month the week after next.
Spoilers.
Mm-hmm.